All right, thanks for inviting me here today. I'm Nico, co-founder of Wicker and Roots. This is my first time at launch. Usually I hang out at the RSA conference, which is going on right now as well. It's the largest security conference in the world. But I was actually glad that I was invited here today instead because a bunch of us are boycotting RSA this year because there's a high probability that RSA sold a backdoor in its software for about $10 million. A backdoor is essentially a way for someone to listen in on your communications. But any good hacker knows that if someone can listen, then anyone can listen. And backdoors are not a good thing for any of us. So I'm lucky enough that I've been educated by the best hackers in the world. I've been helping run DEF CON, which is the largest hacker gathering in the world, for well over a decade now. And in 2009, Thomas Cross came and taught us how to break into a lawful intercept machine. Well, my first response there was, well, wait a minute, what's a lawful intercept machine? Pretty much these are the wiretap machines, so an agent can listen to any of your conversations. Well, as soon as I learned how to break into one of these lawful intercept machines, it became very clear to me that a backdoor for the good guys, 100%, always means a backdoor to the bad guys. And that experience has been crucial to where I am now today with Wickr. Because last year I was on stage at RSA talking about Wickr, a new app that we had just launched that allows you to send private, anonymous, secure text, pictures, voice, and video that self-destruct. Unlike Snapchat, our messages really do self-destruct. And in fact, our technology is so strong that not even the NSA can listen to it. So after I got off stage at RSA, I was approached by an agent from the FBI who asked me for a backdoor. I was lucky that this wasn't my first experience, my first rodeo being approached by the FBI, because I definitely was not as obedient and scared as I was the first time that I was approached by the FBI, which was in 2005 for some research we did with Cisco Gate. So I was able to tell the FBI agent absolutely no, that I wasn't going to give him a backdoor in my software because it wasn't the right thing to do for him, and it wasn't the right thing to do for me. I let him know about Thomas Cross and about how anybody can break into backdoors if we make one. And then I also let him know that my ancestor was a drummer boy for George Washington. And one of the most important missions that they did together was they established the US Post Office. The big difference between the US Post Office and the British Post Office that was run by Benjamin Franklin was twofold. George Washington had the very strong belief that in order to have a strong social system, you must have private communications without the government's prying eyes and freedom of information without government censorship. These ideals are what made America great. Unfortunately, today, the post office here in the United States has also been compromised. But we at Wickr consider ourselves the world post office because we think that you deserve those rights whether you live here or whether you live in China. So a few nights ago, I was having dinner with enemy number 0 for North Korea. And a bunch of the dissidents in North Korea are using Wickr and Wikipedia to bring information and communication into the country to bring down the dictator, who I consider to be our enemy number 0. This is a guy that starved over 3 million people recently and killed his own family. So that really makes us happy to see Wickr being used to bring down dictators, because my co-founders and I were brought together by the very strong belief that private correspondence is a universal human right that is extremely important to a free society. In fact, I would say it's the most important thing for the future of the world right now. Luckily, the United Nations agrees with me. The universal human rights, Article 12 and Article 19 also defend the right to private correspondence and freedom of information. And so when the FBI agent asked me for this backdoor and I said no, I also let him know that even though Wickr was only 13 people, that I already had full-time general counsel who worked at the DOJ previously. And I let him know that a question that I often ask her is, what's the best country in the world to run Wickr today? And the answer is the United States. The United States is the best country to run Wickr because we're a zero-knowledge system. And if you have a zero-knowledge system, then the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment are here to defend you. We stand on very strong legal ground here. And I'm going to fight that to the end, I let the FBI agent know, because if I lose that fight, then I lost this country that my ancestors risked everything to build, and I wasn't going to let it happen. So it's been a year now, actually exactly a year since that FBI incident. Since then, we have not heard from the FBI again, and all of our legal requests for information have dropped to zero. It's because we have a zero-knowledge system, and they know we don't have anything we can provide to them. So unlike two of my competitors, Silent Circle and LavaBit, they had to burn their servers because they were worried the government was going to get the information. On that same day that they burned their servers, we didn't have to burn our servers because we didn't have anything. But what we did do is become the very first company ever to release a warrant canary in our transparency report. A warrant canary is essentially something that says, I have not been subject to any secret gag orders, and I don't have a backdoor, and I'm telling you the truth. This was really nerve-wracking because there's absolutely no legal precedence for this, ever. Maybe in the 1970s, librarians were fighting the FBI of keeping them from get records of what books you checked out, but there really hasn't been anything since then. Pretty nerve-wracking. Since then, we've had Apple also follow us down that path. We're really honored to see that they also put a warrant canary in the most recent transparency report in November, and we're hoping that a lot of others will follow. So, one big inspiration that I've had that's really big in the hacker community and was also really big, very influential for Steve Jobs was 1984. Right now, with all the summer of Snowden going on, a lot of us here in the country are complaining about the fact that we live in an Orwellian state and that it's just like 1984. And while it is really bad here in the United States, in places like North Korea, it's actually worse than the book. It's worse than District 12 and Hunger Games over there. And it's all of our duty to help change that, and I can tell you how. All you need to do is start encrypting all of your communications. And I don't care if you use Wickr or you use my competitor, but it is every one of our duty to encrypt and to create hover traffic to make it more difficult for the surveillance state to exist, because it's not good for any of us. And the good news is, with Wickr, we've now made it so easy that my 4-year-old sends hundreds of top-secret encrypted messages every day. My teenage daughter, that's the main way that she communicates and sends pictures to her friends. And they don't have to worry about the fact that the internet is forever. Because in my mind, a much greater threat to my friends and family than the NSA is Facebook. Because Facebook was not made for your benefit. They sell your personal information. In fact, I think people would be very shocked if they understood how easy or how often your private communications are bought and sold and accessed by strangers around the world. It happens so often and it's so easy that we teach kids how to do it. About 5 years ago, I started a nonprofit called Roots Kids at DEF CON. Last year, we taught the kids how to eavesdrop in on your cell phone calls, how to read your text messages, how to break into Facebook and Twitter, and how to turn on the interfacing camera on your Samsung Smart TV from anywhere in the world. These are things that we can teach kids how to do in a half an hour. So while we're all here complaining about the NSA surveilling us, we're not looking at the real problem, which is surveillance has gone mainstream, and you need to find a way to escape the internet. And Wickr can help you do that. And that's what we're here to do. We just got almost $8 million in the bank, so we're hiring about 10 developers right now. If you want to help change the world, at the very least, start using Wickr and come talk to us if you want to join the team. Thanks. I have some removable stickers here for everybody's interfacing cameras.
Okay, I know some people gotta have questions. Let's see some hands. Kick it off. Okay, I have one while I get the mic over there. Nico, talk to us about hardware, because what you guys are doing is a software solution, and yet we're all you're building into other people's platforms. Do you have a sense of which manufacturers are more or less secure, and how do you, as a software developer or your software development team, kind of interface with that?
Yeah, we don't trust any of the hardware. Hardware is really where the core of the problems are. So we have some tips on our website that talks about different ways to not get your hardware owned. Forever, for instance, I've been saying no Angry Birds for me for a long time, because with Angry Birds, you put that on your phone, you will be compromised. Things we do as a development team, though, I think that are pretty unique, is we assume that the hardware has been owned, and we disguise every call down to the hardware. So for instance, maybe you type a K, it looks like a J. There's ways to hide it if you assume that it's not secure, and you build from there moving forward.
Yeah, just two quick things. I really like where you're coming from, and I get why it works. I'm curious just a little bit more about how Wicker works. And then also, do you see any initiatives for, along the lines of Warrant Canary for compliance, app compliance, device compliance, going into the mainstream in the future?
So part of your first question, like what I would tell the RSA community if we're going to talk crypto, right, is I say, well, we use ECDH 521 for perfect forward secrecy, AES 256 for the data, and TLS for in transit. We also bind every message to the device, so even if the NSA was miraculously someday to break ECDH 521, which there's not enough power on earth to do so, but let's say they did, they still wouldn't be able to read our messages because you have to have the device that the message was sent to. By the way, that perfect forward secrecy that you hear a lot about, ECGH 521, that was written by Whit Diffie, who's on my team. The regulation question. Our regulatory risk has decreased dramatically since the summer of Snowden. One of my other investors is Dick Clark. He recently wrote the Commission on Surveillance report for Obama. And one of the key points was in there was no backdoors. We got to stop asking company and make companies doing backdoors. So regulation is going our way. Finally, it's definitely one of the good things that Snowden has done for us.
Questions? Talk to us about your statement eyewear.
So far, my eyes are not on Google. I boycott Facebook, don't have any Facebook friends, don't invite me to your party. But I'm at the highest end of least digital footprint.
Would Wickr ever go to kind of have a similar service to Skype that isn't being watched or
That's
something
actually who I consider my #1 competitor, especially because if you read Skype's privacy policy in terms of service, they clearly state they can do whatever you want with the conversations you have with your mother on that service. I don't think people realize it. We've been beta testing calling and video calling since DEF CON, so about 6 months now. We'll release it in Q2, because once we had a secure, private, anonymous connection between two people, there's a ton that you can do. So calling will be the next place.
What are some of the platforms that Wicker's available on?
It's available on Android and iOS right now, and we'll have desktop in a couple months.
Other questions? Are you more concerned about the access that private companies have to our information or the government?
I am much more concerned about companies making money off our private information because they are ruthless and they have no oversight. Experian right now, you can buy lists. If you want to target people with dementia, you can buy lists for 7 cents a piece. You want to target rape victims? Go buy a list from Experian, 7 cents a piece. They're the worst example of what happens when we have intensive personal information retrieval for buying things.
Other questions? I know you guys are interested. What advice do you have for other entrepreneurs that are either in the social space, we have a lot of people building apps here. How seriously do they need to take encryption, and what are kind of steps 1, 2, and 3 that you think most either social or startup companies are missing?
Yeah, I think the minimal viable product worked really well the last decade, but the threat has now changed. It is significant, and you need to think about that very seriously from the beginning. Assume you're owned, and now what? And so where you get with that is we need more zero-knowledge systems. I want the next generation of people to build Google and Facebook and Microsoft, but with zero-knowledge systems where they're not collecting your personal information and putting it in a database. Because if it's in a database, I can get it.
Talk to me about trust then. You know, because essentially, right, we're relying on private companies to either have a zero-knowledge system or the whole, you know, the ephemerality of Snapchat, right? It's sort of unknown what they're keeping on their servers. It seems like some data sticks around. How do you build that trust with your customer base, and what do you advise companies to do that are looking to have that strong reputation?
Yeah, that's why when we first came out, you know, Snapchat and I, we both started at about the same time. And when we launched, we were actually really worried that we were going to be positioned as a sexting app, which to me would be such a shame because this is being used by all the most famous human rights activists in the world to fight dictators on a daily basis. But now we can get a little bit more fun now that we've come out serious and trust. So like, for instance, when I think of Snapchat, the reason why I'm very confident that we will take them over the next few years is because Snapchat was a tool made for kids. Wickr was a tool made for spies that kids will use. Because kids, more than anyone, want to escape the surveillance state. They live in it every day.
How hard is it in this era where most of the people here in the room I see are on a phone or on a computer? We're engaged in really deep and meaningful ways, right, with people all over the world. If you want to claim any gleam of privacy, what does it take, right? Like, you're wearing the glasses, you're building completely encrypted and self-destructive messaging. You know, what does it take to have some remnant of privacy now?
Well, we need to make more services like Wicker available that are just as easy and cool to use, and I think that's coming. There's other things that I do, like, you didn't see me rip on Google, even though I also, have more data than anyone, because I still use them. I can't get away from it. I have to use Google Maps. So what do I do instead? Couple things. I have a Faraday cage where I keep my phone sometimes, so the Google Maps can't see where I am every second. And I also feed Google Maps misinformation. So a lot of times, just when I'm bored, I'll put an address somewhere and send it there, or ask different things. So misinformation is another good way to kind of lay on top of an untrusted network. Also things like talking code, right? Just like kids do. They know these kind of things already.
What percentage of your time personally do you think you spend taking steps to protect your own privacy and security, like the measures you were just describing?
Every moment, every day, but I don't really think about it anymore. It's innate for me to think about my digital footprint and where it is and what it's doing. Every time I use a credit card, every time I pull out my phone. But that's something that we all need to be aware of. Not everyone needs the same level of privacy that I do, but we all should be aware every moment of the digital footprint that we're leaving out there.
Hi again. So I'm in the business in some cases of wanting to actually monetize data, right? So what would you? But I'd also like to earn the trust of my customers or the customers of my clients. So what would you offer up? Are you developing maybe an API or something that you can use at an underlying level so we can have transparency and say, yes, absolutely, we're gathering some data because that's kind of what we're in the business of doing and possibly reselling it, but it's going to be anonymized or it's going to be aggregated or some kind of principles so there can be a level of transparency and then they're still taking advantage of the information economy and doing things with it to help grow the pie, so to speak.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, which I think in the future we can find ways to do advertising that aren't evil. We haven't yet. We will have an API moving forward. Some of the common mistakes that you see someone like Whisper make right now, that is supposedly you have all these kids putting their secrets out there and thinking they're anonymous, when the app has your UDID, which is essentially your identity on your phone, and it tracks your geolocation. So I, as a hacker, if I got hold of that database, I could tell you who any one of those people were and what their deepest, darkest secrets are that they're putting out there on Whisper. So don't collect things like that. You know, it's easy for us to find them.
Other questions?
You said that the messages self-destruct. What happens if someone likes to keep a history of their messages? Do you have to have them self-destruct,
Yes.
or how does
So
that
really,
work?
how we think about it is what as society as a whole, we've done a really good job of inventing cyberspace. And where we spend all our time is thinking about inventing cyber time. So right now, a message can only live 5 days. But when we have our pro features, you'll be able to pick any time you want that message to live. Some messages, maybe you want to live 7 years. Some messages, maybe you do want to live forever. But if you want a message to live forever, I'm going to make you hit 2 buttons to do it. It's not going to be on default like it is right now. And I believe that every piece of personal information out there needs to have an expiration date. That's how we can protect ourselves moving forward without having to depend on the cloud companies to protect us. I consider it a lot like the milk expiration date. You know, kids used to die because they drank bad milk, and we as society came together and said, you know what, we need to have an expiration date on this milk. And now we do in almost every country around the world. Well, I think that exact same thing needs to be done for personal information, and I think it needs to be a requirement for kids' information. It's the only way we can save the kids moving forward.
Talk to us about your business model for Wickr. How are you planning to make money?
Yeah, good question. You should always ask everyone that question because that's usually how you can tell. And like I said, my founders and I were brought together by the very strong belief that private correspondence is a universal human right that every person in the world deserves for free. So that's what we will provide. We'll always have a base service of messaging and calling. And most of our users will never feel like they need to spend a dime. Then we'll expect our power users, what we consider our top 3.5%, to pay for features like unlimited international calling, conference calling, video, secure mail, and secure storage.
Do you expect it to ultimately be more of an enterprise than consumer play, or are you looking to expand into both spaces?
What I see happening right now, I help pioneer the chief security officer industry as a whole, and what I've seen over the last 10 years is what I call consumerization of the enterprise, and that's how we plan to infiltrate the enterprise. Right now, you know, there's entire hospitals and cops and intelligence services all over the world using Wickr, even though we don't sell to them. But in order to change and offer our product to sell to them, it's just a licensing model difference, like how do you sell 1,000 of these at once instead of one?
Other questions? Thanks so much, Nico.
Thanks for having me.